I'm going to talk about cameras and lenses today, but I'm going to do it in the order I think they should be stacked in. Feeling and purpose first, gear second.
Thank you so much for tuning in for another episode of Photography Radio. My name is Tomasz and today you are listening to The Woo with Karen Hutton, where she muses up a tasty blend of inspiration, photography and life. Enjoy.
Can you imagine your life without photography? No? Then you will love this show. And it doesn't matter if you're a DSLR, a mirrorless, or a mobile phone shooter. We're here to help your photography grow. This is Photography Radio.
Hi, it's Karen Hutton, and welcome to The Woo. This is a weekly musing and tasty blend of inspiration, photography, and life. One thing I can tell you, the air is different here. Today we've got gear and emotion in the crosshairs. And I hear you thinking, what the heck is she going on about now? All right, let's talk photography. Clearly, it does involve cameras, lenses, and a certain amount of gear, especially in landscape photography, one of my loves. If you know me, you know I tend to resist talking about gear or telling anybody about how to do anything technical, because my experience is once you do, that is the conversation. Technique and the best gear. But if that conversation is in the right context, it's way cool. I mean, if you're talking about expressing your artistic voice, creating signature work, what it is you want to say through your photography, the stories you want to tell, and the art you want to create, and how gear can serve that master, oh yeah, baby, I'm in. So I'm going to talk about gear as it relates to the woo factor and the emotion, vision, art that you want to convey and create. See, most people get this backwards. They'll ask, what lens should I use? Before they've gotten specific about what it is exactly they're doing. See, every single choice in photography and in life, just to keep this in perspective, should be in the context of what your bigger vision is, the result you want to create, the end product, if you will. Now, some of you may think, this is obvious, but I can promise you, from speaking to thousands of people around the world, it is a point that gets surprisingly lost in the shuffle. So yes, I'm going to talk about cameras and lenses today, but I'm going to do it in the order I think they should be stacked in. Feeling and purpose first, gear second. Feeling and vision is the boss. Gear is in service of the boss. And I'll use myself to illustrate certain points because that's just who I know best. So now, cameras. Let's start there. Which one's best? I get asked this a lot. And I always want to answer, how the hell do I know? What do you want to do? I mean, what do you want to feel and experience as you take your pictures? What form factor do you like? Do you like menus? Do you like buttons? Do you like the old-fashioned vibe in a camera? Do you like something sleek and modern and small? Do you want to stick it in your pocket? Do you want to throw it in your purse? Do you want to use it on auto only, auto and manual, or are you a total manual geek? Good Lord, throw me a bone. Okay, let's say travel or street photography is primary on your list. You want a camera that's lighter, lower profile, smaller, etc. You do know it's not getting easier to travel with camera gear, right? So do you want one body, one lens? Two bodies? Interchangeable lenses? How big of a bag do you want to carry? It's all there for the picking. You just have to decide how you want your camera to work for you. You are the boss. But if it's landscape you're after, well, you're going to want weather sealed. You might want to use filters, tripods, a couple of bodies so you don't have to change lenses in the field. And unless you can levitate, in which case, show me how, please, you're going to have some mighty zoom lenses in your bag. Now, this gear list is naturally going to be longer and heavier. My point is, those defining factors will steer you into your ballpark. Cameras suited for your purpose. I mean, they're all good these days, but what works for you? The bottom line for minimal crazy making, start with what you love to do, what you want to create, what you want your end product to be. Do you want big prints? Do you want wall murals? Do you want social exposure? And what do you want to experience while you create these images? And then go from there. So now, lenses. This is a big topic. Lenses are like your eyes. They see, duh, and they are actually what express your perspective. So choosing them accordingly is very important. Okay, we come back to that question. Which one's best? I wish you'd stop asking me that. Okay, so let's break it down and start with wide angle and wide effect lenses. I kind of roll these all into one because it's simpler to talk about it that way. Wide effect. Wide effect lenses can be anywhere from the extreme end, 8 millimeter, 10 millimeter, all the way up to 23 or even 35 millimeter, depending on who you talk to. And I'm referring to full frame equivalent just to have a common denominator here. These wide effect lenses present a view of the world that is wider than what the eye can see. That is, wider than your natural peripheral vision. So in that sense alone, they present a vision of the world that is greater than, somehow, expanded, sometimes otherworldly. Wide effect lenses have these things in common. There's more in the frame, there's more in focus, just naturally because of the design of the lens. And the wider they are, the more possibility there is for distortion. Now that can be a bad thing if you don't want distortion, like in architectural photography, when you want absolute symmetrical perfection, in which case don't go too wide or tip your camera up too much. But wide can be genius if you want distortion to help create an alternative reality vibe in your images. You can tip it up or tip it down to increase the effect too. For some people, wide-angle lenses aren't even enough, so they'll make panoramas. I do that sometimes to make it even wider, because if it's done right, wider is more epic, more grand and sweeping, and puts the viewer into the greater scene, so it's a more visceral experience. From an emotional point of view, which is what I think is so interesting, images taken with the wider view lenses tend to feel more epic, more sweeping, more grand, more expansive, sometimes more trippy, big, beautiful, otherworldly, bold, with lots and lots in the frame. If this is a perspective of the world that sends tingles down your spine, then wide-angle or wide-effect lenses may be your jam. Now then, mid-range lenses. I think of the mid-range lenses as being roughly from about, say 35 millimeter to maybe 70 millimeter or so in full frame equivalent. Basically, it's the lens range that fits within your natural peripheral vision or thereabouts. These are great for the personal view, kind of the documentary view, the life as I sees it perspective. Mid-range lenses are like the same size frame as you, so they're your personal perspective, your personal view, like physically. They represent a slice of life. It's not bigger than life. It's not too zoomed in and microscopic in its view. It's just, here we are, this is the slice of life. It's a piece of the bigger picture. Also, if you choose to use it that way, like in landscape, have some big epic view in front of you, but there's some really compelling aspect of this bigger view that tells a part of the story you want to share. It's sort of like the little baby elephant running with the big pack of elephants. It's just something really poignant about seeing that happen. So mid-range lenses allow you to sort of pick that out of the bigger picture. Mid-range lenses also represent what you choose to see. So the world is full of so much to see and so much to experience and so many images. A nice mid-range lens will allow you to choose and pick out what you are looking at in the midst of the melee. And with a good one that has a good aperture range, you can have a little or a lot in focus. Some of the good mid-range lenses may come as low as 2.8, 1.4 maybe, so you can choose how much or how little you want to focus on within this personal view as well. You can make the backgrounds fade out or you can have it all in focus. You've got all of those options with a mid-range lens. These images feel to the viewer, that's very important, that's part of your end product, personal, inviting. They feel special because you chose it. It's your personal view. So those are some qualities, some woo qualities, if you will, of a mid-range lens. And if creating those kinds of images and those kinds of stories floats your boat, then a mid-range lens needs to be in your bag. Now then, telephoto lenses, and for our purposes here, I'm going to include telephoto and macro in the same group. You'll see why in a second. Telephoto, I mean like the 70 to 200, 100 to 400, 400, 600 millimeter lenses, all of those. They're used mostly, typically in sports, wildlife, sometimes portraits, and even sometimes landscapes. And then, of course, macro, which is usually somewhere in the 100 millimeter full frame equivalent range. I'm including all of those lenses in this conversation because here's the thing about macro and telephoto lenses. You have less in frame. So it is your personal view, but this is your personal view really in there, like even more specific, even more dialed in. These lenses really focus the attention of the viewer on this one point or this one aspect of the story you're telling. They create compression, which, you may or may not want, but that's one of the things they do. There are more details in photos taken with telephoto and macro, and they tend to have a really tremendous depth of field, especially the macro lenses. And some people just love that bokeh and love that ability to separate the one specific target of the whole image away from the rest of the field, which is what depth of field will do for you. So, on an emotional level, here's where it gets interesting. Telephoto images and macro images tend to feel more intimate. They're more delicate, kind of dreamy, up close and personal, like in your face or really delving in. So if that's an approach you like, you're an examiner of detail, and that's what makes you say, I love photography, then you'll naturally want to look at a telephoto lens or a macro lens or something that does that job. So you might think this is all pretty simplistic, right? But my point in zeroing in on these from an emotional and very woo-centric point of view is to invite you to think of it a little bit differently, to think about lens selection not just from what's the best one, what's the sharpest. You may not even want the sharpest. You might like a vintage lens that you have to actually adjust manually and that's a little bit soft, or you might like a lens baby or some other kind of more fringe lens that has a different effect because of the emotional impact you want to create with your work. So think about the emotional effect of a particular piece of gear before you buy it, before you consider it, and what you want to make, the emotional effect it has on you and potentially your viewer, and think about what it is you enjoy actually seeing. How do you look at life? How do you look at stories? What kinds of stories float your boat and, make your toes curl? What do you enjoy experiencing? What do you enjoy feeling? How do you like to interact with your gear? That's huge. Let those things be a consideration in your selection that day, or in your choice of your next camera and lens kit. Consider the fact that art is emotional. It's supposed to be. It always has been. And that we're trying to convey feelings and ideas and perspectives, which means you actually have to love and feel stuff and make strong choices, like your gear, from that perspective. We artists want to move people. We want to connect with people and make our voices heard more than anything. What I'm hoping is that we can start flipping the conversation around a little bit. It's a very woo thing, like I keep saying, to have the gear selection conversation in the order of feelings first, and then choosing the gear to support the feeling. But I think it's really smart. I think it makes results more spot on and technically better. And I consistently see better, more artistic, more signature results from approaching gear selection this way. It's not always comfortable, and a lot of times, trust me, you'll be going against popular opinion. But then again, it might just be the stretch you need to take the next step in your artistic journey. So those are my thoughts of the day. I hope they get your juices going and get you thinking about things in a new way. Maybe you'll have a whole new perspective I didn't even mention. I'd love to hear about it. In any case, get out there, take pictures, and get your woo on. See you next time.
Thank you so much for tuning in today. Hit subscribe on your podcast app. It would mean a lot for us to have you as our regular listener. Head over to photographyradio.com to drop your suggestion for future editions of Photography Radio or simply to say hello. We would absolutely love to hear from you. In the meantime, have a wonderful night, and we will be back with more photography in your ears very soon.